Good afternoon. My name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book review. Today I'm going to be covering this book, Central Park Night. It's a fun fantasy novel, a sequel to another in the Piers Night series. This is written by C.J. Henderson, and it has a William Shatner referral as the praise on the front cover. The cover art is by Cliff Nielsen, so that wonderful trio of dragons with the mage doing magic things in front of them is by a person named Cliff Nielsen. This book is a modern fantasy. I alluded to it a minute ago, but the knight in the title is not that this is a sword and might kind of character, but actually just the last name to the main character, Piers Knight, who is a modern day magician. As they explain at one point near the climax of the story, it was always so easy for the high priests and witch doctors of old. They would position themselves in front of their altars, throngs of believers throwing hope and awe and desires at them. No wonder they could produce results. How the magic works in this setting is that magicians are able to harvest that hope, that awe, that faith, and produce magical effects. Effectively, through human emotion, they can break the laws of physics. And in some cases, this can be used for personal gain. In some cases, it can be used for magical might in a explosive sense. And Piers Knight uses it to defend the world frequently. The entire opening is one where multiple groups of performers of all sorts perform at seemingly random locations across New York City and are performing in rain, without someone supervising them. They are just performing music. And Piers Knight, with an intern, he uses, I guess, the emotion from the performances to repel a creature from another dimension. But the combined emotion from those performances leads to a great world-defending magical effect. The story then unfolds that there are dragons. They are effectively eldritch beings from, I don't know if it's specifically a different world or if it's a different universe, a different plane, but these creatures come from beyond. They are immensely powerful, both physically and magically, and they have bit my tongue for a second. So they have this pact that effectively they're not going to abuse their might to affect humanity. Piers Knight ends up meeting one of these dragons, and it only knows of him really through reputation, but it seeks him out. The dragon, like in many other stories, can turn itself into a human form. By the time this dragon has approached Piers Knight, he has a new intern. This one young, nerdy, not really fit, not really magical, just a nerd, really, a New York City nerd. This character, this intern, doesn't really know what's going on, but he has an inquisitive mind, and he asks the right questions, and eventually the dragon asks Piers if dragons were a threat to Earth, would he be able to and be willing to stop them? And Piers Knight, like any good hero, thinking he's talking to a good guy, responds in the affirmative. If dragons were a problem, he would stop them. And this sours the conversation immediately. From there, the story evolves into a kind of law versus chaos story where one of the most powerful dragons promotes order, whereas the adversarial one, promotes chaos, war, bloodshed, that kind of thing. The other one promotes control and peace and orderliness. And it takes a very modern spin where the chaos is not necessarily good, but the preferable option to a powerful creature that enforces its will on others. And ultimately, this book comes across as a love letter to modern fantasy from a comic book writer. And in the climax, as Piers Knight describes to his intern, it is this emotion, this belief and hope in a magician's oratory or magical skills that feeds that magician power. And the example immediately asked afterwards, after that explanation, is, "You mean like Jesus Christ and the story of the loaves and fishes?" asked Raynert. 5,000 people and he feeds them all with one basket of food? "Something like that," agreed Knight. Raynert, the intern, kind of figures out how he can stop these dragons and how he can fuel Piers Knight in his attempt to defend the world from these dragons. One of the dragons divulges the information of their existence to the UN and proceeds to direct certain governments on how to destroy them using small nuclear blasts. One of the dragons is allied with Piers Knight and tries to save as many of his companions and comrades as possible, but he is only able to bring one to the climax. And the climax revolves around Piers Knight performing an act of great magic in defense of his world in Central Park itself. Hence the title, Central Park Knight. It's really interesting. I love this book. I'm not going to reveal... obviously, this is the kind of story where the good guy wins in the end. I'm trying to not reveal more about the plot, which is hard when you like something. This book is optimistic. It's nerdy. It's a love letter to nerd culture as a whole. All these different things that make up, the geeky, nerdy cultures and subcultures, fandoms, and brings them together as something that is productive for this world in a way that isn't just entertainment. It is what sustains the world. And it's a really nice story that does that. It takes almost a campy, a niche attitude towards modern fantasy, looking at it in a very meta perspective, and makes it work. And that's what this book does, and I really love it for doing that. It's from copyright 2009, 2011 by C.J. Henderson. The prologue, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 were previously published under the title An Excess of Joy in the anthology Spells of the City by D.A.W. It's a really fun story. I bought this, I don't know how much for. I know I bought it at Coas. It's where I get most of my used fantasy books. Not because it has a big fantasy section, though it does, but just because it's the one I'm nearest to, and when I'm on vacation and looking for other books, I kind of think about travel and memoir stories more so than I do fantasy. And most used bookstores in the areas that I vacation are more of that non-fiction-y or Western paperback kind of bookstore. So I can't tell you how much I bought this for. I suspect it had a sticker on it that I peeled off, but I loved it, and I'm sure if you're a fan of fantasy, and even modern fantasy especially, I think you would like this book. It's fun and witty, and it was hard to put down. I think I read this all on a single day off. So Yeah, I recommend Central Park Night for those kinds of people, and it's a good gateway book as well. I think it doesn't require knowledge of Brooklyn Night, the first in the series. It just can be picked up by itself and enjoyed, and that's what makes a really good book. My name is Wildstag. Thank you for tuning in to another used book review.